Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. You saw we got the engine bay all completed, we got the fuel cell all completed, and like I was saying in the other videos, now we need to shift our focus to the back of the car. As you saw in the title, we're going to be working on the rear radiator. Now, I'd already took some measurements and ordered this radiator from Summit. This is a Griffin radiator. This is just a single pass cross flow radiator. There's no baffling or separation or anything. Now, in order for this to work in the back of the car, there is a good bit of modifications that we need to make to it. We need to chop off the inlet and outlet, put some AN bungs or more than likely some ORB fittings on here so we can have removable AN bungs. I already went ahead and cut off the fill cap. We're going to be capping this off and putting a little nipple just so it can bleed off to the expansion tank. And this is already perfect size to just barely fit in the back of the car. I had to chop off the fill cap that came factory on here just to get it to fit into place. And also what we need to do is turn this single pass into a triple pass. Now right now, this is just a wide open tank on this side and a wide open tank on this side. The fluid is going to come from the engine into the top of the radiator, and it's just going to disperse itself across, unevenly cool, and it's not very efficient. So a common thing that you do is separate this into thirds. You can see I have a mark here and I have a mark here. So we're going to put a slit in this tank, slide a plate in, and weld it all the way around. So now the fluid will come in at the top of the radiator, hit that plate, send it across this way, come down, hit another plate, send it back this way, go down, and then go back this way and feed to our pump and back to the engine. This is the most efficient way to cool the fluid in your car, and I think it's going to work really well for what we're doing on my setup. Also, we need to have a couple tabs welded on the side so we can physically get this mounted into the car. So as you guys already know, we're going to take it to my boys at Jack's Fab Shop, have them help us out, and we'll get this thing dialed in. So we head on over here, and he just gives me free reign of his shop to use really whatever I want. So I cut everything off, busted out the grinders, and just started prepping this as much as I could just to set him up for success so he could go ahead and weld it all up for me. Okay, so I got all of the bungs cut off. I got the slits in here to make it a triple pass. Now I just need to make a couple mounting tabs to go on the side, and we should be good to go. Okay, so we got the hole drilled for the vent, -20 ORB. We're going with ORBs just in case anything happens to the AN head or it gets mauled up or nicked up. We can just replace it with a new one. I put a cap in the drain. We're gonna put that on the back side. We got the slits and everything all cut out so we can make it a triple pass as well. All right guys, so we're back from Jack's Fab. We got all the work done on the radiator. It was heavily modified. I wasn't able to film too much between the workers and the machines and grinders. There's no way to get a decent video. I tried filming a little bit on my phone, but let me go ahead and give you guys a once over of the radiator and show you everything that we got done. So here on the front side at the inlet at the top of the radiator, my original plan was to weld on an actual -16, like a male bung. But Justin made a good point that if it ever gets marred up or dropped or nicked, you have to cut it off in order to replace it. So everything we put on here is ORB and NPT bungs, mainly ORBs. So we have our -20 ORB for the inlet, -20 ORB for the outlet. We cut off the fill cap at the top of the radiator, cap that off, and move the vent to the front here. This is a -6. And our original drain was right here in the front. I went ahead and plugged that, and we moved the drain to the back because this right here just goes right to the floor, and I don't have to worry about dumping all the water inside the car. This can just go right to the back. We added our mounting tabs on both sides of the radiator here. And like I'd kind of already explained, this was just a single pass radiator. It was just one big open tank here, one big open tank here, and the water would just kind of disperse across however it saw fit, and it's not efficient for cooling. So we cut it into thirds. This top third we cut around, put a plate in to cap this off, as well as this bottom third, put a plate in, welded it. So that essentially turns it into a triple pass radiator. Now it's not completely sealed off doing it this way. I'm sure there's some air gaps where water and air can still pass by on the sides, but you know, 90-95% of the water is still going to be directed in, across, down, back and out of the radiator. So that's everything that we got done. It should be very efficient and work extremely well for cooling on this car. So what we need to do now is go to the back of the car. Ignore my mess. I got a lot going on here. But we need to come back here, get the radiator fit, and kind of play with some different positions, see what we're happy with, see what we can make work, make sure nothing's gonna get in the way of any of our lines, and come up with a good way to mount this. I have in my head an idea of what I want to make work, so let's just see if we can make it happen. Now I also ordered this universal fan shroud. I just took a measurement of the core of that radiator and got something as close as I could. I think it was maybe like an 1/8 inch short on the sides. But it's small potatoes, that's just something we can fill with a rubber seal or something. Now I did already open this up just to make sure that it will fit. So you'll see I've already had my greasy mitts all over it. So let's get this mounted on the back of our radiator, and then we can position the radiator into the car where we want it. I said I already put this on just to make sure it'll fit. And there is that tiny 1/8 inch gap on each side. So I'm gonna put some edge guard along the sides here that will not only help seal this fan shroud to the radiator, but should hopefully fill that gap in on the sides perfectly as well. And we also have some adhesive backed foam that I'm gonna put at the top and bottom of the radiator to seal those ends of the shroud also. And then we have this M4 hardware with nylon nuts that we're going to secure the shroud to the radiator with. So I want it to fit up something just like this. A nice even gap here at the back of the frame rail. I have clearance up top, but right now the radiator is just resting on the frame rails, and we can't be having that. I don't want it to just be metal on metal, rattling, causing stuff to stress and crack over time. So I have these little like 1/8 inch washers. I'm gonna put them on each side to act as a spacer. So that way, once I get all this mounted, I can take those washers out, and this will be floating and not resting or rattling on any of the metal. So here's what I was talking about. I got the washers here just while I fab up the mounts. Once it's done, I can pull these washers and it won't be making any contact with the frame rail. We have a nice even gap on the back side here, and same thing on this side. It's the same exact washer, so it's all evenly spaced. It is making a little bit of contact here at the top, but once we get it mounted, this is just a little thin extra, skin here. I can just hammer that up to make a little bit of clearance. Other than that, it fits extremely well. It looks sweet. Super happy with it. So now it's just a matter of finding a good way to mount this in the car. Like I was saying, I would like to run a piece of tube from the frame rail up to this lower windshield brace. It would actually provide a good bit of structural integrity to this guy as well, not like we really need it. And then off of that, I have these tabs here that we can weld to the bar and then just bolt it just like that. Let me cut a piece of tube real quick and just see how it's gonna work out. So we will bolt these in. So it'll end up being something like this with this 3/4 tube. I'll plate the bottom and the top where this will get welded. We'll weld these tabs to here, and then we'll just have it mount right here on the sides. All right, so I'm having a little bit of a dilemma here. I tried the round tube, I'm also trying the square tube. This will obviously be a bit stronger, but having the roll cage and crash structure and everything in the back, that's all gonna be round tube. I'm trying to decide what will look the best at the same time. So I'm in a little bit of a pickle there. Okay, so I'm gonna change up the way that I'm mounting this a little bit. After talking to some of my buddies who are in pro, They had made a good point that the way that we mounted these tabs vertically on the side here, if I just hard mount this and have this whole thing floating, and all the weight of this radiator, and especially once you put some G-force in the car, it's going to pretty much double the weight of this thing when you're driving. And it's going to end up fatiguing and stressing a lot of these mounts on the side, probably leading to failure and have it cracking and leaking at some point. So I'm trying to come up with a better way I can support the weight of this, and I think I came up with a much better idea. We're going to get some edge guard and a pretty thick rubber hose that will put a slice down and run it right on this lower lip of the radiator. And then when we put this in the car, all the weight of the radiator itself can just be resting on the chassis. It'll have the rubber to absorb some vibration, and then we can use these tabs on the side just to hold it in place. It won't be supporting any of the weight, maybe a little bit when you're going side to side, but that's going to take probably 3/4 of the load off of these tabs and just have it resting. And also, if I get a thick enough hose on the bottom, that should space us up from the frame rails to where we're not rubbing on anything metal as well. And that should actually be plenty thick to have this rest on the bottom and give us spacing on the frame rails. Let's take it over and see how it looks. We'll take these washers out because hopefully that rubber strip will space us up enough. That actually worked out perfect. We have a little bit of a gap here, a nice straight gap along the back, a gap along this frame rail. It's not much, but this is going to be hard mounted now, so it's not going to move around at all. So that'll work out perfect, and it also seals air from going under the radiator as well, so that kills a couple birds with one stone. So now let's work on the supports for the side, and then we'll get this thing all bolted up. Alright, so the fitment's all good using the rubber on the bottom. I got gaps on the side, a nice straight gap on the back. I'm also switching over to using the square tube instead of the round tube. A, it's stronger, and B, I think it looks a little bit better because it kind of matches the, square design of the radiator. So I'm going to make some base plates for the top and the bottom. We'll get those welded in, we'll trim this to size, and then we'll start welding in these tabs. So I have some of this 3-inch flat bar. We're gonna weld it across something just like that. We'll do, a 3.5 inch piece. Okay, so I got the base plates welded in on both sides. Turned out pretty decent. So now what I need to do is make a plate for the top of this. Now this is extremely thin metal, and it looks like the square is landing right on a body line here. So I'm gonna have to get a little creative. If I cut a square, it'll be good for the majority of it, but it'll have a little corner that's just hanging out here. So let me see what I can come up with. So I fitted the radiator back in so I can put this square tube exactly where it needs to go. I got it all notched to the angle that we need. So what I'm gonna do is just put this guy in here. We'll get it tacked up, we'll pull the radiator out, and we'll weld it out. All right, so we got the driver's side mount all welded up. The bottom and the top turned out kind of like ass. I just had it turned up too high. It was burning through the tube, but not melting to the actual plates that I made. So it's not the prettiest, but throw some paint on there, it'll look all right. It's actually probably some of the ugliest welds on the entire car, but once this is all put together, you're not gonna see it, luckily. So yeah, there's that one side. Let's go ahead, I'm gonna let this cool down. We'll bolt the radiator up and then we'll start working on the other side. All right, so we got the left side in, it's welded, it's primed. I threw on a couple riv nuts and I'm using a nylon spacer just to help, I guess, a little bit with some vibration. But here it is, not too shabby. And we need to go ahead and do the same thing over on the passenger side. All right guys, so there it is all mounted up. I'm super happy with how it turned out. As you saw, I got these nylon washers in between the aluminum and the steel just to have some kind of protection there. We have the rubber strip on the bottom, gives us just enough of a gap so this radiator is floating on the sides, not rubbing anything. I had to hammer and make a little bit of clearance up top, but now it clears all the way around. Fantastic. And I was gonna run some 3/4 inch tube on the side like you saw in the beginning of the video. I'm really glad I ended up going with the 1-inch square tube because it's just so much stronger. It looks a lot cleaner right there next to the square radiator as well. All right guys, it is now a few days later and I am editing this video, and I did a lot more work on the rear of this car and my SD card completely crashed and I lost all of it. So let me show you what I went ahead and did. I made some aluminum ducting to go on either side of the radiator just to separate the hot air from the cold air and really make our rear radiator setup as efficient as we possibly can. This is really important when you're doing a rear radiator, just so you don't recycle hot air and have a lot of cooling issues. So it came out super nice. I had formed it all the way to this crazy design and put some edge guard on it so it is completely sealed. And I am very happy with how it turned out. I wish I could have put in the whole process in this video, but unfortunately I can't. Also, something that I want to point out to you guys, my garage for this video and the last couple has been an absolute disaster. I have a ton of room in here now. As you can see, the garage is nice and clean and organized. We have tons of room to work and film. So this big mess you guys have been watching will be a thing of the past. So I apologize for that. And hopefully you enjoyed this video. We have a lot of cool stuff coming. I have just placed a ton of orders so we can start jamming and making progress on this car and getting it closer to being finished. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and I will catch you on the next one. Later, guys.